What's going on, guys? It's Cal here from Buffalo SportsCenter. Today we're going to be talking about the Buffalo Sabres and their infamous playoff drought that has continued for 13 years and has no ending in sight. So where do we even begin? Let's talk about Terry Pegula, right? Like 14 years ago, buys the team, gets a team that's on its way to the playoffs, and hey, they made the playoffs under Terry Pegula. It did happen. But after that playoff season, Terry Pegula and management decided to have a rebuild. I get it. Some of their top guys were getting older. Derek Roy, Thomas Vanek, Jason Pominville, Ryan Miller. And then they also had some young guys like Christian Ehrhoff, Tyler Myers, and so on. They decided to trust the youth. They decided to trust management. They decided to trust the system and trust the process. Let's just say that did not work. That did not work at all. We are 13 years in the future. If we get time travel back, somebody tell them to not rebuild because that rebuild has not stopped. 13 years. I mean, come on. 13 years. The NHL is a league where almost half the teams, and some years, half the teams do make the playoffs. I mean, look at the COVID year. Half the teams made the playoffs, right? And the Sabres have not made it for 13 years. That is an absolute joke. And the fact that Buffalo still has a hockey team in the city is, quite honestly remarkable. Because this franchise is a joke. This franchise is in the dumps. And I mean, there's been so many times during this drought where I've thought, maybe next year. And I don't just say that as the meme, as the joke, oh yeah, there's always next year. No, there have been legit times during this rebuild where I've thought, if our management could just be a little bit smarter in the offseason, we will get there. We just need a little more help. I mean, 4 or 5 times during the drought, I've thought that. Last year being one of them. And this team has not made any progress during these 13 years. I mean, they've regressed each and every year since then, besides last year. Last year's an anomaly. And the fact that they didn't make the playoffs last year is a joke. Their offense last season was the best in the league, and they still didn't make the playoffs. This year, UPL is having one of the best years of a goaltender in so long for this franchise, and they still missed the playoffs. There are 4 or 5 teams in front of the Sabres in the standings this year who physically and practically do not want to make the playoffs. These teams are rebuilding. These teams have star players who are about to retire, like Alex Ovechkin. These teams play hideous hockey in front of the Sabres. These teams left the door wide open to a Sabres team that didn't have a more than 3-game winning streak for the whole season. They left the door wide open for one of the most mid teams of all time. And they still missed the playoffs. It is just absolutely incredible how mediocre and trash this hockey team has been over the last 13 seasons. An absolute joke. And the fact that they have not found the right head coach or GM to get them out of this rut is remarkable. It is absolutely incredible. I mean, I'm speechless. It really just doesn't make sense. I mean, you would think 13 seasons, one of them you have to luck into it, right? One of them you have to have just a great offensive year or great defensive year or great goalie and luck into it. Last season, they had the offensive year. This season, they had the goaltending year. They didn't luck into it. They were so bad in the other aspects, so bad coaching, so bad in the special teams department, so bad everywhere on the ice. It's just a joke. How does this franchise continuously have coaches who do not push their players in practice? I mean, this is going on 5 coaches in a row where reporters constantly harp that practice is not that hard. They don't push the guys. They don't train the guys. I mean, look at Casey Middlestat. He just goes to the Avalanche, a team that just won a Stanley Cup, that knows what to do, and he makes an absolute mockery of what he did in Buffalo. He says, the Sabres practices were kind of a breeze. We're just coasting out there. In Colorado, we work. If I'm a member of the Sabres organization, especially that coaching staff, I am thoroughly embarrassed by that comment because that shows you belong nowhere in this league. It is just an absolute joke. So let's go through a little bit of the history behind this drought. Like I said, the 2010 to 2014 era, you make the playoffs the first year, right? You got that infamous game against the Flyers where you clinch the playoffs and the crowd is going crazy. Let's just say the crowd hasn't gone crazy in a long time, and the Sabres have had some of the worst attendance records in the league over this 13-year drought. You can't blame the fans. I mean, who would want to go to a game when you're not even trying out there? And I get it. You know, a lot of these guys have tried, and we've had a lot of really bad teams of guys who have tried, and they're just not NHL caliber players. We've also had some teams and some guys give up on the franchise. I don't want to point any fingers, but you guys know who I'm talking about. Then we get to the second era, I would call it, 2015 to 2018. Now this is where we're finally thinking, okay, you know, we've had a couple years, you know, maybe 5 years at this point of no playoffs. Okay, let's flip it around. This rebuild sucked. I mean, we've had some bad teams now. Finally, we tank enough. We get the number 1 overall pick. Connor McDavid is coming home, and the NHL draft lottery hits us in the face. The Edmonton Oilers pass us, and Connor McDavid gets to go to Edmonton. Safe to say he's had quite the time at Edmonton. Not so much success in the playoffs, but he's still the best player in the league, hands down. I mean, you watch him play. I mean, Connor McDavid is special. He can score from anywhere. He's got some of the quickest skates in the league. Just hands down, one of the most talented guys I've watched on the ice. But we get Jack Eichel, who, if you're not going to get McDavid, I'll take Jack Eichel, though, right? Because Jack Eichel, still a very good player. There's plenty of NHL drafts where it's the number 1 guy and then nobody else in the first round. So the fact that we were still able to get a guy as good as Jack Eichel made me hopeful. Pair him up with Evander Kane and Ryan O'Reilly. Sure enough, this team's got to at least make a wild card spot, right? Nope. Bad goaltending, bad defending, and guess what? Jack Eichel turns into a complete psycho for this team. Evander Kane has a lot of drama around him. Ryan O'Reilly says the city of Buffalo has made him lose the love of hockey. Yeah, that team made me lose the love of hockey too. And I sit here in the year 2024 saying that has not changed. This franchise has still made our fans lose the love of hockey. And for the 5,000 people who regularly attend games, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you still have season tickets at this point. I mean, we see night in, night out. Weekday games at the KeyBank Center are empty, and it is embarrassing. It is embarrassing to watch. It is embarrassing to watch Toronto take over our barn every single time we play them. Same thing goes for Montreal. Ottawa does it. Detroit does it. All of these teams do it. I mean, again, you're a player for this team. You go out there, big rivalry game against Toronto. We're right in the thick of things. And it's 75% Toronto fans out there. I mean, do you even want to play at that point? I mean, that is just embarrassing. But you can't blame the fans, because if I'm a season ticket holder, I'm selling my ticket too, because I am not watching this pathetic franchise lose another game to Toronto on home ice. And, I mean, you ain't making your money back on any other games because they suck so bad that you can't really sell tickets to anyone besides opposing fans. Let's talk about the second era. Kane leaves, O'Reilly leaves. Then we get Sam Reinhart, and, you know, Sam Reinhart's been with the team, but now he's the you know, the 1A to Jack Eichel. You still got Ristolainen, you still got some other guys. But overall, I mean, this period of hockey sucked. This period of hockey absolutely sucked. And, you know, there were some teams where, if you look at their roster right now, and you could sort them out. Guys like Evan Rodriguez, who are playing good now. Sheary, you know, he's been good other places. I mean, you could put together a pretty good lineup right now from, you know, a mismatch of these teams from 2019 to 2021. Again, Linus Ullmark was one of the best goalies in the league for Boston, last season. Still is a very good goalie. The list goes on and on. But together, this team absolutely sucked. And this was also part of the Ralph Krueger era, which Don made a video on this channel if you want to watch that about Ralph Krueger. Again, probably the worst NHL coach of all time. And the fact that this franchise hired him makes complete sense, right? Because this franchise has been run by a complete idiot for the last 14 years. Now we get into the current era, 2022 to now. Let's look at last season. I mean, last season is the one bright spot of this drought. This team scored a lot, and they made hockey fun again. And last season, I had so much fun streaming games on this channel, making videos about this team, watching games with friends, going to games. I mean, it was incredible to watch this team score goals. Now, again, were most of their wins 6-5, 7-8? Yeah, but it didn't matter. This team didn't need defense last year. They didn't have goaltending last year either, and that is what killed them. They missed the playoffs by 1 point. Do you know how it feels to miss the playoffs by 1 point after having, at this time, a 12-year playoff drought? 1 point. 1 point. You needed one more win. Think of how many times they just barely lost last season. Think of how many times all they needed was that one goal with the goalie pulled to get it to overtime, to get that 1 point. And they couldn't do it. They fall 1 point short. And then we get into this season, and we hear all the players saying, this is our year, blah, blah, blah. We know the expectations now. We're an older team. We're still young, but we're older. We're experienced. We know the pressure. Show up, show out, sell out the arena, and we will win for you. This team's been one of the worst teams on home ice the last 3 seasons, and they're saying this stuff. And I was in attendance for the opener this year against the Rangers. And that was an absolute embarrassment. I mean, from everything that was said this season, coming into this year, that game perfectly summed up how this season went. Disappointing. I showed up to that game very excited. I was ready to see last year's team a little more mature and a little more ready to play the game of hockey. And most importantly, I was ready to see a playoff team. That did not happen. And at the end of this season, I'm more hopeless than I was at the end of 2 seasons ago. And that is bad. That is bad. I have zero faith in this team. Zero faith in the coaching staff. Zero faith in the GM. And I want to have faith. I mean, Kevin Adams has got us so many great young prospects. We might have the best prospects in the league. Doesn't matter if they're not on the NHL ice, though. And how many years has management told us, maybe next year, maybe next year? I believed them. I believed them. I believed them. I can't this year. I just can't. Too many teams pass the Sabres within a 2-year rebuild. The Sabres are on year 13 of that rebuild and have still not found the core they're looking for. Now, they have a lot of guys signed long-term, but a lot of those guys just have not looked the same as last season. So we'll see. Maybe it was a down year. That still doesn't make up for a 13-year playoff drought. It is just absolutely despicable. To a franchise who has had some of the best fans in the NHL over the last 30 years, even over the last 40 years, it has been an absolute joke. An absolute joke to give them this poverty of a franchise to root for. And again, I'm not blaming any fans. That arena should be empty. The way some of the players talked this year, too, really, really stung with me. I mean, Tuck's interview a couple weeks ago, talking about, the whole saluting the fans things, talking about how the players were butthurt that they got booed. You should be booed. And don't get me wrong, a lot of the boos are not aimed directly at the players. They're aimed at the franchise. But these players are professionals. They have to realize that. They have to realize that they are playing for a franchise that has not made the playoffs in 13 years. You have a team that is supposed to make the playoffs. If you are not living up to expectations, you are going to get booed. That is your job. You are making millions of dollars. If you cannot deal with that, then you should not be in the league. And we've seen that with players that play here. I mean, they whine, they complain, they go somewhere else. And it's just, I don't even know what to say anymore. I mean, this team is so close. They were so close last year. And Kevin Adams sat on his hands in the offseason. Nobody is talking about it enough. Clifton and Eric Johnson, that is the best we do? I mean, come on. You have so many prospects. You could have traded for 2 stars. This team would be in the playoffs, no problem this year with how weak that wild card spot is right now. And Kevin Adams sits on his hands and holds on to each and every prospect so the Amherst can have a good playoff run. So the Jacksonville team can have a good playoff run. I mean, come on. What an absolute joke. That close, and we do nothing. Again, I like Kevin Adams. I'm going to give him one more offseason. I think he does have it in him. I think he's scared to ruin what he made. I think he's scared to ruin the core that he made. Because I think he finally saw that glimmer of hope that all the fans did, and he was scared to bring in a cancer like Jack Eichel to this team. But you cannot play scared in the NHL, because other teams are going to go right by you. Just look at the Detroit Red Wings. If they make the playoffs this year and we don't, that's an absolute mockery. Because we were a much better team last season. And we were on the same trajectory, and it just hasn't worked out. Us and Toronto were on the same trajectory, maybe, I don't know how many years ago that was now. It's just all turned into blah. Again, Toronto, I'm not gonna make the first round playoff joke that everyone makes. Okay, they haven't had success in the playoffs, but they've made it there, and they've had great year after great year after great year in the regular season, and they have a guy named Austin Matthews who carries that franchise, along with great surrounding players, William Nylander, Mitch Marner, the list goes on and on. The Sabres don't have that. And the Sabres, quite frankly, don't know how to play hockey on home ice. And it's so annoying as a fan. And when you look into the advanced analytics, which I try not to, I try to use the eye test as much as possible. But you look into the advanced analytics, and oh boy, I mean, this team might have just got lucky last year, because some of their stats are just so mid, so mediocre, that this team just might not be good for another 13 years. But we'll see what Kevin Adams decides to do. We'll see if Kevin Adams has the balls to fire a guy like Don Granato, who is a developmental coach, and that is it. We'll see if Kevin Adams has the balls to fire a guy like Matt Ellis, who has single-handedly ruined the Sabres power play, the sole reason why they missed the playoffs this season. We'll see if Kevin Adams finally decides to help this team and go all in the offseason. And most importantly, we'll see if Terry Pegula has the balls to open up his checkbook and pay guys who are actually going to skate on the ice rather than long-term injured players to just reach that cap floor. We'll see what happens. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Do you think this drought's going to end anytime soon? Personally, I hope it does next year. We're close. But I've said that so many times before that it's starting to make my mouth numb. I mean, we'll see what happens. Thank you guys for watching. Peace.